Trump doesn't believe it. Canada breaks a $13 billion agreement and turns its back on the USA. Have you ever imagined a country simply turning its back on the United States and choosing Europe as a new strategic partner? That's exactly what Canada did. In a historic move, Ottawa ended a billion-dollar deal with the US, leaving Washington stunned. But what led Canada to make this drastic decision? Were the tariffs abusive? The lack of trust in American allies? Or a strategy to guarantee more autonomy? In this video, we'll reveal the behind-the-scenes story behind this shocking breakup, the impact of this choice, and what it means for global balance. Stay until the end, because this story could change the course of global geopolitics. Imagine waking up to news that completely changes the game on the global stage. Canada, one of the United States' closest allies, decided to break a $13 billion agreement and, to the surprise of many, is now with open arms to the European Union. But what happened to lead Ottawa to make such a drastic decision? Is Canada tired of being treated like a second-rate partner? Could this be a direct response to commercial and political pressures imposed by Washington? Tensions between the two countries had already been building, but no one expected the situation to reach this point. Now, with this historic rupture, the United States finds itself facing a turnaround that could change the balance of forces in the West. The most impressive? Not even Donald Trump can believe what is happening. But after all, what was the trigger for this crisis? Is Canada really willing to abandon the influence of the United States and seek new allies? And what does this decision mean for the future of international relations? Today, we're going to dive behind the scenes of this scandal and reveal details that few are talking about. Stay until the end, because the impact of this decision can be much greater than you imagine. If you also feel that the United States is increasingly isolated because of Trump's decisions, subscribe to the channel to follow behind the scenes of this great global upheaval. The relationship between Canada and the United States has always been marked by ups and downs, but overall, the two countries have maintained a strategic partnership in both trade and defense. For decades, Washington exerted a dominant influence over Ottawa, securing advantageous agreements and imposing conditions that did not always benefit Canadians. However, this dynamic has begun to change in recent years, especially after the harsh trade policies implemented by the Trump administration, which left Canada in a vulnerable position and, more than that, deeply dissatisfied. The trigger for this rupture began with the tariffs imposed by Washington on steel and aluminum, directly impacting Canadian industry. But the pressure didn't stop there. Tariffs on agricultural products, threats of trade restrictions, and even Trump's inflammatory speeches against historic allies have contributed to the growing unease. For many, it was clear that the United States was treating its closest partners with the same aggression it used against adversaries. And Canada, tired of being hostage to this instability, decided to react. Prime Minister Carney and Defense Minister Blair began sending signals that Ottawa was reassessing its strategic position. Discreet statements were transformed into firmer positions, culminating in the real possibility of a break with Washington in one of the most important agreements of recent years, the purchase of F-35 fighter jets. This billion-dollar contract, which initially seemed like a natural step to strengthen Canadian defense alongside the United States, came to be seen as a burden in the face of growing uncertainties. With the United States making negotiations difficult and treating allies with an iron fist, the inevitable question arose: should Canada continue to depend on a single supplier for its national security? This debate quickly took over the political backstage, the press and public opinion, generating an impasse that now puts Ottawa and Washington in a direct dispute. And the big question that hangs in the air is this decision just a strategic bluff? Or are we facing a definitive change in relations between the two countries? Defense Minister Blair, in a recent interview, made it clear that Canada cannot continue to accept conditions that place the country in a position of total dependence on the United States. According to him, no sovereign nation should blindly trust a single partner, especially when that partner imposes barriers that harm our economy and national security. This statement raised an alarm in Washington, as it signaled that Ottawa was willing to take drastic measures to guarantee its strategic independence. And this would not be the first time that trade tensions between the two countries have put a billion-dollar agreement at risk. During the Trump administration, tariffs on steel and aluminum led to an intense clash between the two allies, with Canada retaliating with its own measures against American products. The same happened in the agricultural sector, when Washington imposed new barriers on Canadian dairy products, leading Ottawa to look for alternatives in Europe and Asia. But now, the situation goes beyond commerce. We are talking about national security, a sensitive and strategic issue that could redefine Canada's position on the global stage. With the decision to reevaluate the F-35 deal, the Canadian government not only challenges the United States, but also opens the door to new partners. The European Union, which has been seeking to expand its military and commercial influence in North America for years, sees this situation as a golden opportunity. French President Emmanuel Macron has already publicly stated that Rafale fighter jets could meet Canada's needs, offering a solution that would not only replace the F-35s but also reduce dependence on American-supplied parts and maintenance. Likewise, political leaders in Germany and the United Kingdom are moving to present the Eurofighter Typhoon as a viable alternative. But this possible change in strategy has enormous weight for Canada. The original contract provided for not only the purchase of 88 F-35 fighters, but also the country's integration into a joint defense system led by the United States. Breaking that agreement would mean abandoning decades of military alignment and would force Ottawa to build new alliances from scratch. Furthermore, experts warn that any sudden change could result in economic sanctions imposed by Washington, affecting sectors that go far beyond defense, including energy, transport, and technology. Former Canadian ambassador to Washington, David McNaughton, recently stated that this impasse could become one of the most critical moments in the relationship between the two countries. If Canada does indeed follow through on this decision, we can expect aggressive retaliation from the United States, and not just in the military sector. History has shown that when Washington feels challenged, the response comes quickly. The big question now is the Canadian government prepared to face the possible consequences of this rupture? Do you believe that Canada can truly go it alone without relying on the United States? Leave your opinion in the comments and participate in this historic discussion. With the billion-dollar agreement at risk, Canada needs to act quickly to avoid a strategic blackout in its defense. If the government really decides to abandon the F-35s, what will be Plan B? The first alternative that appears on the radar is the purchase of European-made fighters. France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and Sweden have already shown interest in supplying modern aircraft to Ottawa, taking advantage of the opportunity to consolidate new military alliances. The French Rafale, the Eurofighter Typhoon, and the Swedish Gripen are some of the options being analyzed, each with its advantages and disadvantages. The Rafale, for example, stands out for its versatility and the fact that it is completely independent of American systems, which would give Canada more autonomy in the long term. Furthermore, France is willing to offer favorable commercial conditions, including maintenance and technical support packages that would significantly reduce operating costs. The Eurofighter Typhoon, in turn, has excellent combat capacity and is already used by several European nations, which would facilitate strategic partnerships. And there is also Gripen, from Sweden, known for its efficiency and cost-benefit, being a more economical option without compromising operational capacity. But this change would not be so simple. Experts warn that integrating a new fighter into the Canadian fleet would require years of adaptation, pilot training, and overhaul of military infrastructure. Furthermore, Washington would not let this decision pass without consequences. Canada has been part of the international F-35 program since the beginning, and leaving it would mean losing access to a global logistics network and cutting-edge technology. This is the main criticism of supporters of remaining in the American program. The F-35 may be expensive, but it is already established as one of the most advanced fighters in the world, in addition to ensuring strategic alignment with the United States and NATO. And it is precisely this dependence that bothers the Canadian government. With the recent escalation of trade tensions, many politicians see this rupture as a chance to diversify their alliances and reduce vulnerability to unilateral U.S. decisions. Prime Minister Mark Carney has already made it clear that the country will not accept being treated as a second-class partner, and this position is gaining popular support. However, there is a significant risk to this strategy. Without the United States as its main military supplier, would Canada truly be prepared to face challenges on the global stage? If Canada does indeed follow through with this decision, the consequences could go far beyond a simple canceled contract. We are talking about a change in the balance of power in the West, something that could redefine geopolitical relations for years to come. The first major reaction would undoubtedly come from the United States, which would not accept losing such a close strategic partner without responding accordingly. Washington could retaliate with new trade tariffs, restrictions on the supply of military technology, and even sanctions on key sectors of the Canadian economy such as energy and the auto industry. The European Union, on the other hand, sees this situation as a unique opportunity. If Ottawa does sign a new contract with European manufacturers, the bloc will become an essential supplier for Canadian defense, strengthening ties that were previously dominated by the United States. This would mean an expansion of European influence in North America, something Washington has always tried to avoid. France, in particular, has already signaled that it is willing to negotiate advantageous agreements, ensuring that Canada receives modern fighters without the bureaucratic and political obstacles imposed by the billionaire Americans. And it doesn't stop there. There are rumors that this partnership could extend to other areas, such as military intelligence and the development of new defense technologies. But what would be the economic impact of this decision? The exit from the F-35 program could generate billion-dollar losses for the Canadian defense industry, which currently has contracts and partnerships with American companies for the maintenance and supply of parts for these aircraft. Severing these ties would mean restructuring the country's entire military logistics, something that would not only take time, but also require enormous investment. Not to mention the possibility of reprisals from the Pentagon, which could exclude Canada from future collaborations in advanced military technology. What about the military impact? Canada is a key member of NATO, and this decision could be seen as a weakening of the alliance. Although European countries can provide modern fighters, the fact that Ottawa distances itself from Washington could generate distrust among allies. The question remains, is Canada really ready to give up the protection and support of the United States to pursue an independent path? Or could this decision end up isolating the country in an increasingly volatile global scenario? Faced with this turbulent scenario, tension between Canada and the United States is reaching an unprecedented level. What began as a trade impasse has now turned into a true strategic dilemma with global implications. On the one hand, Ottawa seems determined to follow a new path, moving away from dependence on Washington and seeking allies in Europe. On the other, the United States sees this possible rupture as a direct affront, threatening retaliation that could affect not only the Canadian economy, but also its position within NATO and the international military scenario. But what could happen in the next few days? If the Canadian government confirms the exit from the F-35 program, we can expect a quick and aggressive response from the United States. The U.S. Congress is already pushing for the Pentagon to reevaluate all trade and military agreements with Ottawa. Additional tariffs could be imposed, billion-dollar contracts could be suspended, and Canada could be forced to take even more drastic decisions to guarantee its security and sovereignty. At the same time, Europe is eagerly awaiting this development, preparing tempting proposals to draw Canada into a deeper military alliance with the European bloc. But is Ottawa really willing to follow through with this decision? Or is this all part of a pressure game to force Washington to offer better conditions? This is the big question hanging in the air. If Canada can extract concessions from the United States without having to completely tear up the agreement, this strategy could be seen as a brilliant move. But if Washington decides to play hardball and cut strategic benefits, Ottawa could end up facing unprecedented isolation. And here comes an element of surprise. There is speculation that other countries are watching this situation closely, and that, depending on the outcome, we could see similar movements in other parts of the world. Could this be the beginning of a new geopolitical order? Will other U.S. allies begin to question their relationship with Washington? There are still many pieces to this puzzle that could change at any moment, and what seems right today could turn into something completely unexpected in the coming days. At this point, the question that remains in the air is, will Canada really take this bold step and definitively break with the United States? Or is this all just a grand strategy to pressure Washington into giving in? What seemed unthinkable a few years ago has now become a real possibility. If Canada follows this path, it will be redefining its position on the global stage, opening the door to new alliances and, at the same time, facing possible heavy retaliation. But what about you? What do you think of this situation? Should Canada cancel the billion-dollar agreement and bet on Europe, or is it too big a risk to break up with a historic partner like the USA? Leave your opinion in the comments. Is this a masterstroke by Ottawa, or could the country end up regretting this decision in the future? We want to know what you think about this movement that could completely change the global balance of power. And this story is far from over. The next few days will be decisive, and the developments may surprise everyone. If Washington feels it is losing influence, Trump could take unexpected steps to reverse the situation. And guess what? We already have information about Trump's new strategy to try to regain control of this negotiation. The next video with all the details is already appearing on your screen now. So, don't waste time. Click and find out what the United States' next steps are in this great impasse. I'll wait for you there.